Good morning, everybody. Thank you to the large number of people who showed up for this morning's event. Appreciate your attention. My name is Scott Myers. I'm the Facilities IT Manager for Duke University. And on the program it says that I'm the one that's presenting, which is true, I am presenting. However, we have some other individuals here from AT&T and Sonam that are going to, that are going to help me out with the presentation. They were very integral in this whole process. So we have Roxanne Gartland from AT&T and Joel from AT&T. Roxanne was our lead liaison for AT&T and during this whole process, and Joel has been the PTT guru. And then we have Jim Daly from Sonam, who helped us out with the device selection. So why did we make this transition from land-based mobile radios to push-to-talk? Well, it was very simple at the beginning. Our land-based mobile radio system was basically end of life. There's one piece that I'm told that if that one piece goes out, everything goes down and there's no recovering from it. And part of the reason is because the system is ailing and aging. So that was the first big thing that pushed us. As we started looking at the fact that we were going to need to replace this, we started seeing the fact that a lot of our guys were carrying multiple devices, iPads, cell phones, radios, pagers, and so it was an opportunity for us to cut down on those that large number of devices that each person was carrying. And not only did they have a lot of those devices themselves were old and costly to replace. Some of the radios, 800 megahertz radios that we were using were $400 and $500 a piece. And on top of all of that, we were faced with some issues about safety. How do we make a mass communication to say, hey, there's this large event that's going on and everybody needs to pay attention? So those are some of the factors that pushed us. And one of the other things that we really needed to pay attention to was the huge coverage area that we had to cover. So like most of you, we had several different campuses. We have our main campus and East Campus, which are fairly well close to each other, but there's several miles. There's about a mile apart from each other. We have a primate center, which is off campus, but within the Duke Forest. And then the Marine Lab, which is out on the coast in Beaufort, North Carolina. And on top of that, we also had many different off-campus sites, buildings that we owned throughout the city, things like that, that when anybody went off campus, they really weren't connected to the rest of the group. We have lots of outdoor space, obviously. It's a 1,300 acre campus with over 15,000 trees on campus. It's one of the things that Duke is very proud of is they are a Tree USA campus. So that's great for the students. However, it plays funky with the signals that we have. And on top of that, Duke is really carved out of the Duke Forest, which is over 7,000 acres of trees. On top of that, once you get into the campus, we have 392 buildings with just about 15 million gross square feet. So that's a lot of area to cover when you start looking at indoor coverage. And speaking of indoor coverage, we have one of my main customers is the utilities group. The guys that are out doing all the utilities work. They work in chilled water plants, steam plants, electrical substations, service tunnels. All of these provide their own unique challenges, being the types of buildings that they are, both the environment that they're working in being very loud, but then also just the structures themselves being made out of metal and all sorts of things that are meant to be very efficient. So we started looking at possible solutions. So one possible solution is just to replace it with another 800 megahertz system. Possible, but very expensive. The system itself was so old and in such disrepair that we weren't going to be able to just put in some new equipment. We would have to rip and replace the whole thing. So it would be very, very costly. On top of that, you have to start looking at, for 800 megahertz, you have to look at bandwidth licensing. Same thing with UHF. It was a little bit cheaper as we looked into it, but it still had a lot of the same limitations that the 800 megahertz systems had. So we also looked at the cellular solution. We started talking about that, and one of the things that made that possible to pursue push-to-talk was the fact that at this time, and actually for about a year prior to this, the university was undergoing a big initiative to put in a DAS. A DAS, for those of you who don't know, is a distributed antenna system. And we actually were fortunate enough to go with a neutral host DAS, which meant that all the different carriers, Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon, who helped fund it, they are all going to be able to operate off of that same system. As we looked at this system and we looked at the coverage that it was going to give us, one of the things that we really needed to do was kind of figure out how we were going to try to get the service in there. Did we want to do an outdoor approach, try to blast the signal into the buildings and areas, or did we want to go with an indoor approach? And we chose the indoor approach simply because a lot of our buildings are LEED certified, which is great for efficiency. Keeps a lot of the warm air in the winter and the cold air in the summer. However, it also does a really good job of keeping signal strength out. So we decided to go with an in-building approach. All told, it took about 2 years for us to build out the entire system, and a lot of that was getting the head end set up and getting a lot of the permitting done. And it does cover about the 15 million gross square feet of the building systems, and the outdoor macro network did do a very good job. I think we did do some checking to make sure that that we had as much coverage as we possibly could. But for the most part, the outdoor macro has done a wonderful job covering that for us. So we started looking heavily at the push-to-talk, but we needed to make sure that it would do everything that we needed it to do. So we sat down and we made this list. We needed great coverage inside and out, which the DAS was going to provide us in conjunction with the macro. We needed one-to-one private calling and one-to-many. The one-to-one is something that a lot of people kind of take for granted. The 800 megahertz system that we had started to kind of trim down on bandwidth, which meant that a lot of the one-to-one calling that was happening was actually taking up channels that were very precious, and so that ended up causing delays on the one-to-many calls. So we wanted to get that functionality back in whatever system that we deployed. We needed talk groups, or whatever the equivalent was going to be to a radio channel. So if Steam was on one channel and Landscape Services was on another channel, we needed to have that kind of functionality built into this push-to-talk system as well. We needed to be able to maintain that system once it was in there, and then be able to easily move people around, add people, basically just do that maintenance on the fly as needed. And we needed to be able to do that easily and without really having to go to whatever carrier that we went with to make all of these changes. On top of all of that, we needed a device that was going to be rugged enough and a good enough quality piece of equipment to actually make this work. And we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about Sprint, but we had rugged devices on campus before and they just didn't work well for us, so that was key. And on top of that, of course, when this is a third-party solution, and so we needed somebody that was going to be very responsive if we had issues. And we needed excellent support from them. And we needed a one-button push-to-talk solution. So a lot of our guys are used to carrying around their radios, pull it up, hit the button, and they're talking. That's the kind of a solution that we needed. So we looked at Verizon, AT&T, and Sprint. As we started looking at them, we reached out to the different groups on campus, and Parking and Transportation had already started looking in this direction for their bus systems. They had Sprint, and they weren't real pleased with it. The one thing that really stuck out to them was the quality and the loudness of the devices and the clarity of the devices. They just weren't very good. To start out, the devices weren't very loud, and then when they put a booster on that, it sounded like you were going through a drive-through. You had to, so you had that kind of a distortion going through. So Sprint quickly dropped out. Verizon we met with, and to be honest, they just didn't have, they just weren't up to snuff. They didn't really have a good presentation. They just didn't seem like they were ready to move into that kind of a space. So Verizon dropped out. And that left us with AT&T, and luckily for us, AT&T was ready to step up with a solution that they had been working on, and I will let them tell you about it.
Push to talk. Obviously, the main purpose is to be more productive and faster, right? So if I'm in the field and I need to, this example here, if I need to call 3 people in the field, I have to make 3 individual phone calls, talk to those people, get past the hi, hello, how are you, I hope you're doing good today, and tell them what I need, right? So let's just say on average that takes 2 minutes to do that. If I have 3 people in a talk group, I can use my phone, push my one button, tell all 3 people what I need to tell them, get that response back quickly, and it helps me more effectively manage my workforce. So if that takes 40 seconds, imagine throughout the course of the day how much time I've saved and how much more productive that I've been. So now I can manage my workforce, I can collaborate with people a lot quicker too. I can create on-the-fly groups if needed, if a situation presents itself where I need to talk to multiple supervisors. So it gives me the opportunity to just save time and talk to my staff quicker. So what's the difference with AT&T? We work on 3G, 4G, 4G LTE, and Wi-Fi. So having that flexibility and the different types of solutions that can be offered with the devices gives not only the fact that the device itself works, but as Scott said, it's clear, and you can hear it especially over our 4G LTE. We have up to 250 users in a talk group. We're the only carrier that can have up to 250 users. And we also have the capability for QoS in terms of offering priority service. If you have groups, we have different types of functionality that we can provide that will give them that capability too. So we can collaborate and work on that if you have a need that presents itself. We also have optimized RAN radio access network. We work with Duke. If they have a situation where, let's say, they have a small spot or a pocket that they're having issues, or we'll collaborate, we'll send our team out, we'll work with their team to make sure that we kind of work towards rectifying any issues or any coverage gaps that we might have. Fortunately, with the DAS that they built out and our macro signal, for the most part, we're covered really well on campus. But there's always going to be that one-off every now and again. Nothing's 100%. So we're there to help and try to enhance that where it's needed. And then we can help manage your, you have comprehensive administrative tools. We have what's called CAT, our corporate administrative tool, which allows, and I think Scott's going to talk a little bit more in detail about this, but it allows you to manage your groups, your users, and you can change and modify that at your leisure. We will help initially get that set up for you till you get comfortable, and then we kind of turn that over to you so that you guys can make sure that it's accurate and up to date when you need it. One call for customer care. We have a department dedicated specifically to our push-to-talk users. So you can reach out to them and they can assist you if you ever have a situation and we're not available to facilitate because they've got a whole technical crew behind them to assist. And we have lots of vendors, manufacturers, applications that we work with to integrate, Sonim being one of them as the devices. So there's a lot of flexibility with the product itself that you can explore too. And let's see, 4G, 4G LTE, again, we talked a little bit about that. And you have one-to-one and one-to-many communication. As Scott was talking about previously, whenever you make that one-to-one communication, it ties up that bandwidth that's needed. So now with this option, you can do ad hoc calls on the fly as well. So if you do have to contact somebody, you can create a group at that time, and you can save that group or just use it for that day. So it's very flexible in that regard. You've got a lot of selection of devices from non-ruggedized to ruggedized depending on your needs and what your applications would support. And having the 4G LTE capabilities on devices obviously is going to give you a much better experience across the board. Then for talk group scanning, and Joel used this example earlier, you know, if you've got a radio on your hip and you turn it off when it goes off, you see if it's for you and you turn it back down and then you turn it back up and turn it back down. If you're being initiated on a call with your push to talk, that call is for you. Now you do have the capability to scan groups. So if you're a supervisor, you can scan up to 4 different groups at a time to kind of to listen in and kind of hear different groups that maybe you're managing. And there's also a talk group priority. So if talk group number 1 is what I need to be listening to, no matter what, that group will cut through and that will be the group that you'll hear. So if that's your most important priority for that day, you have that capability to do that. And then along with that, you have supervisory overrides. So let's say you are listening to talk group 1 and the information that they're sharing is not current or it's inaccurate. You can cut in and the only thing they'll hear now is you. And you can provide updated information, or if you have an emergency situation and you need to reach out to that group, you can do that as well too and broadcast to everybody in that particular group. And presence awareness, this gives you the opportunity to see who is available. With the little red, green, or gray light indicator, you can see if they're available. And that helps if you're in a dispatch situation too, because then that dispatcher knows who they can reach out to that's available at that time. And it also lets you know if somebody has their phone turned off too, because if it's gray, that means that that person's phone's actually off. From a coverage perspective, again, as we referenced before, 4G, 3G, LTE. With Wi-Fi, if you do have a building, maybe somewhere in the basement, brick and mortar, sometimes signal's hard to get through, but you have Wi-Fi in that building, you can use Wi-Fi for that capability and still have access to use your push-to-talk product. And we are the only carrier that has push-to-talk service in North America. So with the Wi-Fi piece of that, as well as the different technologies that you can use, you've got pretty good coverage selection. And there's no push-to-talk roaming across the United States, Canada, or Mexico. We do have international roaming through mobile data, which Duke have in campus in China.
Although I will say this, that's on their mobile data, but if you hop on Wi-Fi, as one of our guys did who was in Romania at the time and wanted to call his team back, he was able to hop on Wi-Fi and make a call, and it was fine.
Very good. Good stuff. And again, we've got an array of devices. You can go ruggedized to non-ruggedized. If you have supervisors that want to keep their iPhones or their smartphones and that works best for them, you can have the app on that phone. If you have people that they need to kick them around and smack them and they need to be in a waterproof device, we have those for you too. So we've got non-stock devices. This is just basically collaboration for us to figure out what's going to work best for you and for your in your environment. So that being said, I will let Scott talk a little bit about the devices that they selected and talk a little bit more detail about it.
Nice smooth transition.
Exactly, there you go.
So for us, it really boiled down to 3 devices, the XP7, the Sonom XP5, and the Samsung Galaxy S6 Active. We needed to make sure that we had ruggedized devices for the people who needed it. We did have a few people that needed ruggedized devices that had more of a smartphone feel to it. But then for all of the supervisors and managers that really just needed a smartphone that would do the job, maybe a little bit ruggedized, we did the Samsung S6 Active. But a vast majority of the phones that we deployed were the Sonom XP5s. And I wanted to highlight this because it really was the thing that made this actually a possibility. So I wanted to give Sonom the opportunity to talk a little bit about the XP5.
With AT&T, and my position is a sales position in the eastern half of the country. So as this project came about, everybody at that time was questioning Sonom who. So I don't know anybody in the room that remembers the old Nextel days, if you will, right? Where there was ultra-rugged Motorola handsets, or in your environments right now where you're using land mobile radios, you're using Motorola radios, very possibly. So Sonom, picked up the ball and has run with it here in the past 15 years, and it's evolved to the point where we're at right now with AT&T as a partner on the LTE network and the ability to use Wi-Fi on the XP5. And I think what our customer, right, at Duke looked at was how rugged will the Sonom XP5 really be? What is it that they can, Sonom, do to help us in those areas? And this is where we specialize, and it's a real benefit to the customer, where, if it falls in a puddle, is it going to work when I pick it up? If it falls in the canal, whatever it might be, 6.5 feet of water, 30 minutes, it still works, right? Each and every time. So the whole idea here is just to give you an idea and a flavor on a very high level of who Sonom is and what the benefit, in doing business with Sonom that maybe you've never heard of. So the most important takeaway here is to make sure that I leave with you that Sonom is definitely in the ultra rugged, extreme environment solutions for those customers that have end users that just, as Roxanne said, they kick them around, but definitely they'll fall in the dirt. They'll be in, weather environments that really require something to be ultra rugged. And just to tag on to that, and we'll just get right to the phone here. The one thing and the one takeaway from a cost perspective is that for 3 years we have an exclusive warranty that provides in exchange for a like-new phone, if you will, for 3 years. So if anything were to happen to it, water damage, whether or not you end up cracking a screen, how many in here have ever cracked a screen, right? And all of a sudden the phone that you got for free or for $49 is now $400. So from a business perspective, Scott looked at this and said, well, where's the cost savings here? So if for any reason over a 3-year period, there is no cost to Duke to replace a phone. So I'll repeat that. It's not a 1-year warranty, it's not a 2-year warranty, it's for 3 years. There will be no cost to replace the handset. And that is huge, because when you're in the land mobile radio side and replacing, anywhere from a $500 radio, Motorola radio, to a $1,000 radio, depending upon what particular radio that is for end user, it can be pretty costly. So this is very cost effective. And the neat thing about it is, and I'm not going to read through every one of these bullet points, but I think it's important to note, as Roxanne mentioned earlier, the idea here is to be able to be very convenient. You got it on your belt. You can have an earpiece if you want, but you can have one button push to talk. So it always goes back to that dispatcher, or it goes back to that supervisor, however that individual end user wants to be able to use the handset that best serves their needs and requirements, right? So it's by individual user that you can program the phone for one button push to talk. And the one thing, if you're familiar with land mobile radio, you hear a lot of chatter, where Roxanne was telling you, turning it up and down, not knowing if that calls for you. But when it's one button push to talk and you're in that specific group, you're not hearing, the other 100 or 200 folks that are out there on the radio system, right? Sure, we can do that. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
This is the radio he's got up here. This is obviously a remote speaker mic attached to it. And good afternoon, folks. This is Joel. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, doing a customer demo. Could I have some folks come by, please, and let me know your location? Turn this one off. So it's also coming through my iPhone? I'm going to take this phone out. And it's loud. You mentioned loud. So you can be anywhere in the country or North America?
Just north of Chicago, around D loud and clear. Can you hear it over Wi-Fi? Loud and clear.
Over Wi-Fi.
Hey, Joe, you got Chris here in Austin, Texas. You're coming in loud and clear.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate the help.
And that is so powerful, because on your campuses and in your environments, as Scott was talking about earlier, when you have those remote campuses that are away from the radio network, all of a sudden you're how do we, are we making phone calls? Are we texting each other? What I'm finding is with the AT&T solution, customers that may have gone away from the old Nextel days and coming back to push to talk on the AT&T network, it's all about the critical communications, because how many have ever got a text and go, I didn't know you texted me. Well, I did about 3 hours ago, and oh, I got the text. In this case, you're actually hearing and getting a message on the phone, even if you were in a phone call, to know to call that person back very quickly and very instantly. I mean, it works really well that way. So it's a great benefit to the end users, but it does definitely show a benefit over what you might think texting is going to solve an issue for you, and it doesn't. So again, long battery life. So when I talk about the battery life, the one most important thing here is 2 8-hour back-to-back shifts on the batteries, and being able to making sure that if you're sharing a phone and you're coming on to the next shift, you can go ahead and bring that phone to that next end user, and they can use it, right, because of the battery life. I'm going to end there, but I think we've covered, especially with the demo that we just did, I think it really kind of brings it together on where it really benefits when you're outside of your specific campus area and you need to extend the network, and AT&T allows you to do that, especially with the XP5. And the nice thing about this particular phone, it's really cost effective in the fact that it doesn't require the data plan, right? It's a feature phone. So it definitely lends itself to 2 different worlds where you have a feature phone without a data plan necessarily, and then also our XP7 that will provide everything that you can do on an Android handset right now, you can do on this handset, but you can put it underwater, you can do anything to it. And by the way, if you crack a screen, it's exchanged. No questions asked, and it doesn't matter how many times you do that over a 3-year period. All right? So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you. I think we covered everything.
Yep.
There you go. Oh yeah, easy transition.
It was funny. We handed these out, and I think it was within about a week, we got the first handset back with not a cracked screen, but a completely demolished screen, where somebody had basically was walking across the street and it fell out of their holster, and sure enough, a bus came by and ran over it and crushed it. So they are very rugged. They are not indestructible, and that's all right. So, it was devices like this that really allowed us to shrink down from, a radio, a cell phone, and a pager, and really take all that stuff and combine it down into one device. So for us, then we really needed to sit down and take a look at everybody who was using these and say, okay, what are the different groups? How are they using these? And what kind of devices do they need? And then also what kind of plans do they need? So at first we sat down and we came up with these 4 groups. And it's basically groups who needed a rugged device that needed push-to-talk only, and they could do their job. Groups that needed the ability to do push-to-talk and make some calls. Then groups who needed push-to-talk, data, and the ability to make some calls. And then people who just didn't need push-to-talk at all. So we split all those up into different groups. You see the first 2 groups got the Sonim XP5. And very quickly, as we started kind of talking to managers and supervisors, we thought that several of them would be going with the first plan, which was just the push-to-talk only. But as we looked at the price difference, there wasn't really a huge price jump from push-to-talk only to push-to-talk with calling. A lot of them liked the idea that they had the ability to get a hold of them in multiple ways. So we actually ended up getting rid of the first group plan, or the first group, and everybody that was in that group that was getting the XP5s all got the second plan, their B. All of our supervisors, managers, building coordinators, control techs that needed to have the data on their phones did go ahead and get the Galaxy S6 Actives. We got them, even though they're ruggedized devices, we went ahead and got them OtterBox cases anyway, just to make sure that they had all the protection that they could possibly get. And then for everybody else who didn't necessarily need any of that, we went ahead and gave them a stipend. All told, when we went to start doing the rollout, we had 124 devices that we were replacing cell phones that we already had with Verizon. This actually ended up being a very key thing for us to keep in mind when we were doing the rollouts because of porting the numbers over. It is not so simple when you're deploying 124 phones to make sure that there is as little interruption or disruption to their usage of these lines, because we weren't giving them new numbers. We were taking these old numbers and porting them over. So we had to plan all of that out very carefully. And then we also ordered another 125 devices that were seen as basically just radio replacement. So all told, we had about 250 devices that we rolled out. So what kind of a benefit did we see? Well, as far as the cost savings go, you can see that in any given month, we were spending about $13,000 a month for radios, cell phones, and pagers. With AT&T, with push-to-talk, we were able to get that down to about $7,600 a month. So we were saving about $5,000 a month, all told $63,000 a year. That was during rollout. I will say that cost saving has shrunk, but only because of the cost efficiency of being able to provide people with a radio at a very inexpensively, we are able to actually give more people radios, and so we use some of that money to actually give more people the ability to communicate. So as far as deployment goes, we deployed those 250 phones in 5 weeks. We tried to deploy them based off of their push-to-talk groups. We wanted to make sure that the same people were getting the same training at the same time. We tried to do that in groups, small groups of about 10 people or less. I think initially we did do a couple of sessions where there were larger groups, and that was pure chaos. Once the guys got the phones in their hands, they were hitting the button and queuing up and hearing all the noises and changing their ringtones and doing everything they could possibly think of with the phones. So we really shrank that down. That was our initial deployment. We really shrank that down with every subsequent deployment. AT&T was absolutely fantastic. And I know this all sounds like a big commercial, and it really is not meant to. But AT&T was really fantastic. They had a team that came out that for every single deployment, that all they did was sit down, put the phones together, make sure that they were set up correctly, had the right push-to-talk groups, and were set up and tagged with the people's names on it, and they were ready to go. And part of that was us making sure that we had everybody planned, that we had the groups ready to go, that we had everything labeled correctly. And so once we did that, we were able to get it down to about an hour-and-a-half window. I know it only shows an hour there, but the first 30 minutes when they arrived was getting their phones, making sure that they had everything, sitting down and getting ready for training. Then we did 30 minutes of training, and AT&T's rep came in and did that. We talked through all the different things, and then the next 30 minutes while the next group was coming in, they were able to ask questions and go through any kind of problems that they were having with the system. And it ended up working really, really well, and it had to, because when they were leaving there, they were expected by their supervisors and managers and our IT staff to be using those devices moving forward. So it wasn't a gradual deployment. It wasn't something where they were getting them and then they were going to cut them on at a certain time. They got them, they were trained, and they started using them. And as I said, organization was absolutely key in making sure that all flowed through. Did it go absolutely flawlessly? No, of course not. It never does. But AT&T did a fantastic job making sure that any kind of issues that there were got resolved quickly. Roxanne mentioned the CAT tool, the corporate administration tool. This is what allows us to continue to maintain our system and to maintain it very, very easily. If somebody leaves, then basically, and somebody else gets hired, all we have to do is go into the system, pull up the phone, change the name, hit save, and then when we hit save, it blasts it out to every single phone. So if people switch phones or whatever, any kind of changes that we make are made on the fly and they actually get pushed out. Now, we learned very, very quickly that it's best not to do that during normal operation, just because they will get a message every now and then that basically says, hey, we're updating your phone. And that kind of can play havoc with the way that they, with their communications. So we just made it a habit to do it after hours, about 5 or 6 o'clock, after everybody had changed shifts. We just said, okay, if we're going to make a change, we'll go ahead and let everybody know that you may have to go through the process of rebooting your phone and making sure you have the latest and greatest information. So we're on this with this tool, we're able to manage the first one there. The master list is every single phone that we have. The next one is sublists, so we're able to break those phones up into groups and basically push that information out into those phones. And then the next one, the manage groups, and that's like your contact lists is the sublist. And then on top of that, we're able to make and manage groups. These are your talk groups. These are basically your channels on your radio. And we're able to add as many of these as we need to on the fly. We can add as many as 250 people into any one of those groups, or make it as limited as we needed to. So what was the reception? Overall, very positive. The picture I have up there is representative of one of the managers who came to me a couple weeks after we had deployed. Pulled me aside and said, I love this thing. And I said, well, why is that? He says, well, normally when we're doing a shutdown, I have to come in on the weekend, coordinate with the guys, I have to sit in my office, and I'm on the phone and I'm on the radio system listening to everything that's going on. And he says, I was able to sit at my house in the pond, in my pond, he was actually on a pontoon, drinking a beer and listening to everything that was going on. And I knew that if I needed to, I could reach out to them and contact them, and I could listen to the whole thing. So he was very happy with it, and for a vast majority of the people that we've deployed it to have been very happy. That said, there have been a few issues, and I do want to highlight those. So Wi-Fi to LTE transition is problematic. That said, the Wi-Fi works, if you're in an area that does not have cell signal, and you flip it over to Wi-Fi, it works great. It's not a problem. The problem comes when you leave Wi-Fi turned on the phone. Right now, these devices don't have a way to basically say, my Wi-Fi signal is actually pretty low, but my cell service is actually really good. So I'm actually going to default over to my cell signal. So what we were getting was, because we have a lot of guys that are going in and out of buildings, in and out of tunnels, in and out of all these places, they would get to that edge of the Wi-Fi. And if you've ever done this, if you're walking out and you're doing something on your phone and you get to the edge of the Wi-Fi and you hit a button to send something and you don't get the data. And it's not until you either turn off Wi-Fi or you get past that edge and you pick up LTE that it comes across. Well, we were having that kind of an issue with the phones, except for this was with the push-to-talk communication coming through. They would queue up and nobody would hear them, or somebody would call them and they wouldn't hear them. So our solution was very simple. We just turned off the Wi-Fi. If the guys need to use Wi-Fi, they know how to turn it on. But it was just a lot simpler for us, and it cut down on a lot of the issues if we just turned that off. There was a battery issue with Sonim, with the Sonim phones, and I will emphasize this, that Sonim was extremely responsive to this. They sent us batteries while they tried to figure out what the issue was, and they released, not too awful long ago, it's been a couple of months, released a software update for the phones, and that has seemed to fix the issue. They've been good ever since. The last one is more tricky. The last one is our high voltage group. This is a group of about 13 guys that are using the push-to-talk, and they noticed very quickly a couple of issues. Number one, they need split-second communication when they're doing their switching. The result of not getting that kind of a communication is possibly a safety concern. So one of the things that we did was take a look at the group, and we said, okay, we have 250 people in this group, or we had over 200 people in the group. Do we really need 200 people in this group? Well, no, we don't. We just need to slim that down. We slimmed it way down to around 20 people or so, and we saw the ping time basically go down from about 2 seconds down to about a half a second to a second. That was good. It just still wasn't really working for them. So we're working with AT&T to try to figure out if there's a way for us to reduce that time even further. And one of the things that we're looking at is the dynamic traffic management, which basically gives their calls the priority over basically every other communication on campus, because it is a safety issue. And again, AT&T has been very responsive. By very responsive, I mean they are sending engineers onto our campus to look at the phones, make sure the devices are working properly, look at the macro to see if there's anything that needs to be changed there, look at the DAS, make sure it's configured properly. They're doing everything they possibly can to make sure that that works for them. So in summary, an annual cost savings initially of $63,000. Again, the only reason that has shrunk is because we've just added more people onto the system, and which means that we have more people that are communicating. We were able to find a solution for replacing this ailing two-way radio system. The safety override, which Roxanne alluded to, has been something that we just were missing in the past. We didn't have a way to quickly communicate with everybody that, hey, we have this issue, you need to drop everything and go here, or you need to do X, Y, and Z. And now we have that ability. We were able to eliminate all of our pagers. Finally, in 2015, we eliminated all of our pagers. And a vast majority of the radios. They're the only group that right now that has radios as a backup is high voltage. And that means that we have far fewer devices for us as IT to support. And to give you an idea, that means myself and one other person are the only two people to support all of these devices. And on top of that, we were able to refresh almost our entire stock of mobile devices. So we wanted to kind of run through that and give you a very high level, partially to give you guys the opportunity to ask questions at the end, because every solution is going to be different based on the campuses that are involved, but then also to come on up and take a look at the devices that we have, the XP7, the XP5. I don't think we have a Galaxy. You got a Galaxy, but it's basically functions the same on everything. But yeah, any questions?
It's kind of related.
Sure.
So we actually have some difficulties handing out phones to staff and employees because they're not allowed to use it for any personal use. And so there's some sort of state requirement about state resources and not being able to use it for personal use. So we just don't have a way to do that. So we end up carrying, a lot of us carry two devices, one cell phone that's a personal one, the other. Is that something that you were able to work around, or you don't have that kind of rule set in place? Or?
It was very easy for us to get around that because we're a private institution. That said, we had definitely thought about that, especially when we looked at our mobile device policy, because it plainly states in there that this is meant for work purposes. So as we looked at that, we really had to kind of think through it and think about the repercussions of saying, look, you need to use this. This is your work device. You need to use it as your work device. If you're taking this home, or if you get calls on it that are personal, okay, don't make it a habit. We've got this pool of minutes that we're going to be watching. If it becomes an issue, then we're going to take away your ability to make calls. We're going to take away your ability to text. We're going to take away yada yada.
So they still carry 2 devices?
They carry one. They carry their Sonom XP5s, and they're able to make and receive personal calls on those. But we basically kind of leave it up to the supervisor, or we kind of look at the reports, and if we happen to go over minutes or whatever, and we see we have this offender, then we can address that one person, or we can go in and say, look, this group just abuses this policy, and so we're going to go ahead and cut off the cell phone service.
And I might offer one more factoid. Any of these devices can be radio only, as was alluded to earlier by Scott. But in particular, you can not only just have this as a radio, but you can limit the people that this radio can call, just to the other people on your campus or a subset of the other people on your campus. You may have certain people you just want to talk within housing, but other people may need to talk to everybody on campus on the radio, housing, food and beverage, whatever all those other departments are, parking, transportation, etc. So there's some, inside the CAT tool, there's a reasonable amount of configuration that you can do on a by-unit basis to protect that unit from calling out to others.
Well, I did notice you had a stipend line too, so that was to the PMs or?
That was honestly mostly ended up being for directors, for some of us in IT who didn't really need push to talk. It was just a lot of the people, PMs were some of them, although we ended up getting some push to talk devices for PMs because when they would go out on construction sites to review a building or whatever, they would want to be able to communicate with those people. So that said, we have some floating phones that are out there for particular departments to use, and we also do have some phones for severe weather events or emergency response for hurricanes or whatever coming through, ice storms, for managers and supervisors who are getting the stipend right now to basically be able to say, okay, this weekend we're having an ice storm coming in, go ahead and take these home, they're charged, they're dialed into your talk groups, go for it.
One of the other groups you mentioned, but we didn't go into detail, which is a unique group, which is transportation. We have this device in a fixed mounted car kit, locked, with a coiled cord remote speaker microphone attached to it, with a loud audio speaker because they're driving big buses on campus, with students, it's a loud noise environment, and a diesel engine, et cetera, right? And so they're using this tool as a radio only, but fixed mounted in a vehicle, in a car kit, or in a bus.
And we've got guys in the chiller plants and stuff like that are working right next to the giant chillers that have been using, they tried out mics like that. They didn't like those, but they did like these are all Bluetooth enabled devices, so they got the little Bluetooth earpieces and they were able to use those to communicate. So they loved that feature. But we got guys in tunnels and stuff like that. Tunnels are definitely tricky. I'm not going to guarantee that we have cell signal in all the tunnels, but they do have, we have tried out and have been using some of these devices called Selfies, which are basically, they're kind of cellular extenders. So you have to put one end of it in a place where you have cell service, and then you spread the other one out by a certain distance, and then that kind of extends your range. And so we've been using that at the top of a manhole. We have it mounted. We get cell service to drop the other one down a little bit. It does need power, so we have to run a cable down, but most of the time they're doing stuff like that anyway. So we have setups that work for that.
Are the people in the field, do they make groups on the fly on their own device?
They
Or
can.
do you have to call somebody in IT to like set up a group?
They can. So we have a lot of the groups set up, but and Joel and Roxanne can talk about this. There is the ability to basically say, hey, there's 6 of us that are working on this, and we're going to go ahead and create a little talk group for ourselves, and they can create that on the fly, and then they can use that talk group.
And then the other thing was, well, for us, we just have a lot more than 250 people that we need to reach at a time in the event of an emergency, such as we recently had a chemical spill, our power plant shut down, and we need to talk to everybody in facilities that has a radio at that time, and they need to all know avoid North Campus, or we even had like a shooter event or something.
Right, yeah.
Somebody had a gun on campus,
So for Duke, sorry, real quick. So for Duke, we actually have an alert system that every phone, the students can sign up for it as well, and we highly encourage that. So personal phones are covered that way. All corporate phones are supposed to be entered into that system. If we have an event like that, then they get a call of a recorded message saying, here's what's happening, and they also get a text and they get an email. So we don't have something that works over push to talk at this point.
So we do have a product called Broadcast Call, which can handle up to 500 users simultaneously. Today, the broadcast call can only be initiated by what we call our dispatcher console, which is a PC-based solution. We didn't really show that today, but it is being used at Duke by the transportation department. So it does GPS tracking / location awareness. Doesn't really give you the breadcrumb trail, but it does give you the location of where those units are at that moment. And it can communicate one to many, one way, called a broadcast call, for up to 500 users simultaneously with ruthless preemption. So if you had 500 of these and you had 200 private calls going on at the same time and the other 100 people are talking in a group call together, this broadcast call interrupts all other traffic right in the middle of it, ruthlessly, and you hear a emergency alert audible tone, same tone or similar tone that we used to hear on the TV when they would do that thing back when we were children, right? Or maybe they still do it on the radio. So you'll hear that tone, it'll get your attention, and then you'll hear that one-way audio from the police department or from the provost or the superintendent or whoever's making that call. They can do a 45-second one-way. Hey, this is the provost, we've got a lockdown situation, this is not an exercise, this is a red alert, whatever. And when that call ends, as long as it ends, well, it's 45 seconds in length, it goes out real time to everybody that's not on a phone call. If you happen to be on a phone call at the time that that call is initiated, the minute you end your call, it stores and forwards to your device. So that's our emergency alert monitor, our communication system today. In January, February, we'll have another release, and you'll be able to provision certain devices via the CAT tool to be able to initiate that broadcast call from a handset. That's coming.
Can you do like 2 different 500-person groups?
You can. You can have as many as you like. And you do all of that yourself. You set that up. We would obviously help you and teach you, but it's all done in the CAT tool.
Yeah.
If we were to go back to that screen, you would see when you set up a talk group, you'll have really 3 choices. Is this a standard group? Is this a dispatch group? Or is this a broadcast call group? Once it's a broadcast call, you have to designate a dispatcher because it can only today be done from a dispatch console. And then at that point, you bring in your sub list and you put everybody in that group that you want. And certainly you can have more than 1 broadcast call. If you had thousands, you should have 2 or 3 broadcast calls.
Yeah, because we have the alert system too, but it's kind of like,
for a chemical spill.
it doesn't tell the people that need to like get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Exactly, like what they need to do. And some things we don't alert everybody because
Right.
you don't want like students
Exactly.
to panic. They just like rope off an area instead of like let everybody know, and then they just let us know, like somebody get there and handle it right now.
Where are you ladies from? The same campus?
Michigan State.
Michigan State. Wonderful. Okay.
And then my other question was, does everybody leave their device at work?
Not necessarily. They have the ability to do that. We've got some charging stations and stuff like that. A lot of them choose to do that. However, we have a lot of operators that take them home because sometimes they'll get called in the middle of the night, they need something, and sometimes that's a cell phone call, sometimes it's a push to talk. Some of the supervisors and managers who do have the push to talk stuff will take them home. Again, just because our operators are there 24/7, 365. So if somebody needs to get a hold of them, they want to make sure that they have a way to do that. When I mentioned this before, but starting out, we had operators that were sharing phones because the battery life was great, so we could just do that. But when we started looking at the cost effectiveness of this, we could just give them a phone and it was theirs to manage. And we just didn't have to worry too much about, oh, I didn't get the phone from so-and-so, or it's, whatever.
To put that cost in perspective for you, assuming you were purchasing from a WISCA or now a NASBO type contracting, a national contracting vehicle, and you likely would be through your procurement department, this device for 100 or more is 99 cents. So there's really zero cost associated with the hardware?
Yeah, 500 to 99 cents, yeah.
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 Okay. So it's zero cost for the hardware and $18.99 a month for unlimited radio service, unlimited talk groups or channels, unlimited private calls, that kind of thing. Now, if you had a smart device, like its bigger sister that Jim was talking about earlier, that does Android, and so you're using it as a smart device, you're using it to do your data, get your emails, talk on the phone, it's a $3 a month bolt-on to that plan. So $3 a month incremental, all the radio you want. So when you look at kind of the economics,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy return on investment in a very short period of time over a private radio system.
The other thing that I thought of is, do you have anything on there for, we have like a man down button on our radios that's really important because we have people. So you do have something on
So on this particular device, it's a red device. This is the Sonim XP7 that we talked about. This does have a Sonim Protect program available to it, and it's really kind of a one-up on what you might traditionally call man-down signaling. So your button today is a red button on top. You push the button, right? There may be an accelerometer in those. I'm not entirely certain. This one has an accelerometer in it. So if this phone just falls, it instantly makes the call. I might need help to a center, a Sonim Protect center in Houston, Texas. Then that person calls, the dispatcher from that Sonim Protect center calls that phone, and if that person doesn't answer, they dispatch local emergency resources. So it's an accelerometer, so if you fall off a ladder, they really call it the lone worker program. So if you're working by yourself and you fall, but you can also literally push the button. Now, if you push the button by accident, you get the phone call. Obviously, you can terminate the call to 911, right?
Right.
So that's Sonim Protect.
And the nice thing about that too is if you don't want it to go to a call center in Houston, it can be programmed to your, on campus.
Campus
Your
911
police
center.
Your
Yeah.
police department,
That's usually who we're
or it could, so your police department is 24/7, so that's who it could be sent to instead of, to the call center. So we can
Your
set that.
phone was off.
Yeah.
They didn't call you.
I don't have it turned on this one. That's a good heads up play.
Here they come.
Yeah,
I think yours goes to our dispatch, and then they confirm that you really do need help.
That's
And
right.
then because our dispatch runs.
Right. That's right. It could be sent anywhere you want it. So
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but as we were talking through this and getting ready to deploy all this, one of the groups that we did create was a group for the Duke Police. And so they do have the ability to switch over to Duke Police and make a PTT call, and then they can do it that way. So we just wanted to, again, provide as many different avenues for them as possible. And a lot of times there's actually, we found that Duke Police actually calls out to say, hey, we need somebody to come over and unlock this building or respond to XYZ, chemical spill or whatever. And so they have direct access to the different groups and they know exactly who to call based off the talk groups.
So the Duke Police wanted to be on the statewide police network in North Carolina called the Viper system. So they went to that system. So then that begs the question, how do they call from the statewide Viper system to this radio system? And AT&T makes that connection happen with a product we call interoperability. And it's extremely inexpensive, just like the rest of the services. It depends on your situation and what kind of radio system you have and things of this nature. It can be as little as $50 a month per talk group to connect those private radio system talk groups or channels to the AT&T private talk groups or radio channels. And it could be $1,000 or $1,500 in hardware. Depends on what kind of radio system you have. I don't know if anybody's a radio kind of centric person here, but if you are, we can change the language that a radio talks to an IP and then connect those two talk groups in the cloud, is how it's done. So we're doing that at Duke, we're doing that at the state of Ohio, not too far away from the state of Michigan.
Fairfax.
With the Highway Patrol. Fairfax County, Virginia, we have thousands with those guys. They're doing the same kind of thing, and other campuses and universities across America.
So this is probably a really dumb question, but I don't ever use the radios or do anything. You can still just call it like a regular phone, even if it only has radio
No.
service. Okay, because we do that. Like, I have to call the radios from my desk phone a lot to like tell them whatever they need.
So you got,
So
you
you dial
got,
a number, there's a dial tone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then you dial the radio
Yep.
number that you need,
Oh.
and then you
You've
have
got
to
telephone
wait, there's a beep,
interconnect. It's
and
called
then
telephone
you talk,
interconnect.
They talk.
Yeah.
via your radio system, I get it. And that's a great product and it works. Certainly we can do the same exact thing, only it's a phone number and we turn on the phone. Now, it doesn't mean that that person has complete access to call everybody that you might want to limit them from calling people. And certainly some of those limitations, depends on which device you pick, and also you can limit those people from being able to call out by restricting some of that outbound stuff.
But again, when we looked at the PTT only, and we thought, oh, it's cheaper. They really don't need that option. When we really started talking to people and started looking at it, I think it was only like $3 more, $4 more. So it was very inexpensive to just add that on there. And so now every phone that we deploy has phone service and PTT, and it just because of the cost savings everywhere else, it really wasn't a decision.
Phone service, like they can make calls.
Yeah, and it's like 400 minutes, but it's all pooled together, and so most people don't make the calls, and so in the end, it's very negligible.
So they still end up with like two devices, like a personal cell phone and this work.
That's up to them. Personal devices we're never going to get rid of, and so if they want to carry their personal device, that's totally on them. We had some supervisors and managers that were a little unhappy with that, but we basically just said, look, you're carrying two devices anyway. Most of them were carrying 2 and 3, and so we finally just said this is
The
what's
one
going to
thing
happen.
you do get if you deploy these as a radio only, just like every cell phone in America, it does have to be able to call 911, regardless of whether or not cell phone is turned on. So there's an incremental safety feature there that you wouldn't get on a two-way radio or a traditional two-way radio.
And to Scott's point too, what we find is with the end users and those supervisors, in a lot of cases what will happen is those end users have to call suppliers, just because they have a certain number of suppliers that they need to call. So those can be, set up in a phone book on the phone itself, not outside of the push-to-talk piece. So those, and that's a phone book that resides in the phone itself. And we could set that up to where if you had a department that had those 10 suppliers, that's all they called, those 100 people called those 10 suppliers, it could be set up in the phone book of the phone itself.
And that is one thing that we found a little frustrating, I guess, was there's a lot of really great tools for the push-to-talk management and all that kind of stuff, but when it came to actually managing the contacts, I think there was an option to basically preload some stuff if we knew kind of ahead of time, but there's not that same richness in being able to manage all of that with the just regular plain old cell phone contacts. And part of the issue was, being able to program supervisors' home numbers or 911 or whatever. We didn't have that, so we kind of worked around that in some other ways.
My very last question is,
hope not.
this is all Android right now, and is there any talk into like an iOS platform? I only say we're coming online with some mobile apps for our guys in the field, and so they will probably be using an iPad, iPhone, because our IT likes to manage on there better.
They have
So we
iOS.
can-
This service works on iPhones, iPads. We talked about it, but I'll give you at least the gist. We have about 45 or so devices that the service is certified on. Everything from the iPhone 4S forward, including the 6Ss and 6S and 6S Plus, and certainly all the Samsungs from the, I think the 4 forward, up into including the 7 now, and then a variety of purpose-built push-to-talk devices, that 2 of which are Sonums, but we have others, that are built specifically for AT&T, specifically for this service, with a dedicated PTT button. When you use this service on an iPhone, like I do, carry my business phone, that it comes up as a I'll just do a quick all call. It comes up as a soft button in the middle. Hey, good afternoon, folks. This is Joel doing a quick demo here in Boulder, Colorado. Who's out there to answer me, please? Make sure the volume's turned up. So it works on an iPhone. So for those senior leaders that are already carrying an iPhone, if they're with AT&T, it's very simply $3 a month, bolt on. That's it for the service.
And the only reason that we went with the Samsung Galaxies over the iPhones was one, because of the
Thank you very much.
ruggedness, and the other thing was the Samsungs had push to talk button. Had a button you could program for that.
It's a little convenience
Yeah.
key that you can program on these actives. These actives are exclusive to AT&T. They're not sold by Verizon or Sprint, so it's an AT&T exclusive device. It is waterproof down to the IP68 standards of 5 feet, 60 minutes, or something along those lines. And then it's got almost like a built-on housing, so that it won't just crack from a standard 4 or 5 foot drop. Now, if you throw it off the top of a building to a concrete, I'm sure it will crack. But it does have a level of durability. Now, what's really interesting, and we didn't go into great detail, but I know you've got some questions about this XP7, is Jim will tell you the demo with this at a trade show is we put it in a fishbowl underwater. We have a Bluetooth push-to-talk button attached to it, and we make calls to and from the phone while it's underwater. And then we take it out of the water, and the people are amazed, and we dry it off. And we take a 16-penny nail and a 2x4, and with the screen, we drive the nail into the 2x4 with the screen of the phone. That's the demo at the trade show. It gets a lot of attention.
They don't need to carry cameras.